Life on Side B is a ministry of Posture Shift, a missiological ministry equipping church leaders and parents on LGBT inclusion and care. Learn more at postureshift.com. Also, we want to thank all of our patrons who keep the podcast going and growing through their continued giving. If you love this podcast, consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/lifeonsideb. Now on to the episode. Greg, it is so good to have you here with us.
So good to be here with you guys. Thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, we're glad to have you.
Y'all,
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to visit Greg and stay at his house in Southern California, and it was an honor and one of the greatest memories I have. So,
Aw.
yes.
I'm a little
Josh,
jealous.
I'm jealous of myself. I was like, wait, I got to have Josh in my house. This is amazing. I was having all the kinds of Side B royalty celebrity vibes going on.
No,
like,
but
please be my friend.
But it was a delight. It was my honor to be there, and you and Paulo, such great hosts. And Paulo's going to be on this season too. I'm so excited.
Yes.
The SoCal Side B gays are going to be representing on this season of Life on Side B. I'm really excited for all of it.
I love that.
Because we're having Joel.
We showed up at Revoice this year. We got all that shout out love about biggest group that showed up. Yeah,
Seriously,
we're taking.
I'm waiting for the TV show about Side B life in SoCal.
Oh, we're ready. We're ready to film
That
it.
would be so amazing.
Please.
I came up with a good title. I think Monks in the City.
Yes.
Love it. Yes, please. 100% produce this. Get someone to do it. No one will want to, no production company would probably be up for doing it. We can do it ourselves. It's so good to have you here though. And Bekah and I are here to talk with you. I just realized I hadn't shared. Hi, Bekah.
Hi.
Hi.
It's all right. I jumped in there. For
You
a
did.
little
You
bit.
did. I just forgot to say that it was you and I together here. But Greg, we're here talking about emotional health and how this plays into resilience. But before we get into that, there are probably some people, which I don't know how, that don't know you. I mean, you're Revoice speaker, spoke this last year, all of this stuff. But for those who are listening who may not know you, can you share with us about how you identify and a little bit of how you've gotten to where you're at in your journey of sexuality and gender, or
Yeah,
sexuality and
I'd be happy
faith
to.
or gender, all of it together.
Why not? Yeah. Well, again, my name is Greg Piken. I'm 41 years old, born and raised in Los Angeles, and lived in Southern California my whole life. I identify as gay, and I've had quite a journey of faith on that. More about that in a second. I just want to let you know a little bit about where I'm coming from as professionally too. Been a pastor for 17 years at a non-denominational, what I call a mini mega church. And we'll be actually moving to a different church in San Diego in a couple months called Park Hill Church.
Woo.
And that's, woohoo, go team. And I've also been a therapist for a couple of years, and love kind of combining both of those things into what I do and how I share with people. And I think there's so much integration between faith and psychology that really can help us in our spiritual growth.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. Amen to that. So I've had to learn that the hard way, of course, though. And so that kind of gets back to your earlier question. So I recognized at a young age that I like the boys more than I like the girls. And I met that with all kinds of shame. I recognized that those were some of the kids that got picked on. I also recognized, though, that there was a way in which it was talked about culturally still at that time in the early 90s that was not necessarily safe to talk about. And I had all kinds of designs on becoming a pop superstar. So we were not going to let a silly thing like being gay get in the way of becoming, world famous here. So decided to be in the closet for that reason, actually. I was born and raised Jewish, so I didn't have like the Christian part of my story causing me to stay in the closet until a little bit later. But I had a friend who was a faithful believer in high school, and he ended up leading me to faith in Christ when I was 18 years old. And right after that, he actually came out of the closet, and unfortunately, his church horrifically rejected him. He went running from the church, and to my knowledge, hasn't come back since. And that also kind of gave me an early signal that was another good reason to stay in the closet, because it wasn't safe to come out in church world either. And so no matter where I was, I took some cultural cues and said, this is not safe. And I thought, well, why don't I just take that to the grave? Like I have so many things that I want to do with my life. If this thing's going to get in the way of that, then why would I want to jeopardize that?
No.
The problem was I was met with so much loneliness along the way, and so many ways in which I didn't feel known, that I hit a wall at a very late age, 38, where I finally just said, I'm so lonely, and I so feel unlovable, because people, if they really knew my story, they wouldn't think that that I was as loving as they say I was. But when I hit that wall, I said, okay, I'd either rather leave this life or leave the closet. And thankfully, I chose leaving the closet. So I started by sharing with a number of my safest people, and that turned into a really corrective experience where I realized, whoa, they actually still love me, and they think the world of me, and they actually think that God could use my story, not want me to stay in the closet. And through the process of sharing that more and more, was really, really amazed to see, oh, God doesn't make mistakes here. God actually wants to use my story. God actually has a plan for me, for exactly who I am as a gay man of faith.
Amen.
And I've seen so many different ways in which that's been playing out over the last few years. And it's just been an honor to help others in that space now.
That's amazing.
It is.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, I love it. I like just being able, I feel like it's so important for people to be able to understand that many times I think people in the church think that when we come out, it's just because we woke up one day and thought, I'm going to come out as gay today. But why not? I don't have enough stress in my life. This will get me to that right level of stress.
Absolutely.
Whereas many of us come to that place of like, I am either going to come out of the closet or leave the closet or leave this life. And I'm so glad you decided to come out of the closet, because this world needs you so much. And we're so thankful to have you and have you here. As we move into the conversation on emotional health and especially within this conversation of sexuality and resilience, that's our seasonal theme of resilience. How has emotional growth played into your journey? Like, can you identify a moment in your life where you desired more emotional health in your spiritual life?
Yeah, I think that I've had a few moments of that. My big thing is that the greatest thing that helps us to heal is connection. Connection with God, connection with others, connection with self. And as I look back on my story, I think that without necessarily always knowing it, I had a few little moments of crying out for that along the way. It's interesting now that I'm, trying to put together like a little family of brothers here in Southern California, because as I look back, I've always been accidentally trying to do that without knowing what it was necessarily called. I think about the way in which I was like the driver of the friend group in high school. I think about the way in which in seminary I created a house full of guys that we were doing school and life with. I think about when I finished seminary and moved back to Redondo Beach, I wanted to find a 4-bedroom house where I could have other guys that were part of the church, and we were doing ministry and life together there. And I've realized that for me, emotional health has always had to include connection. I don't think there is emotional health without genuine connection.
Absolutely.
So those are some huge ones for me. And then also um, therapy. I'm not just a therapist; I'm also a client. So, um,
That's right.
and I'd like to think that any good therapy that I've done hasn't just come from education, but it's actually mostly because I'm following the footsteps of the people that have been incredible therapists and counselors and pastors to me over the years. And so part of that cry for emotional health was the points along the way where I said, this is not working. I need somebody in the room with me that I can be completely honest with, completely myself with, completely a mess with, and
Mm-hmm.
still be accepted and listened to and connected with in
Yeah.
that environment.
Amen.
Answer your
Oh
question?
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I really
Okay.
think like I have one big thing. I think everyone needs to be in counseling. Every single human being on
Yes.
earth, especially if you are a counselor. If I'm going to go to a counselor, my first question is, are you in counseling? Because
Right.
I need you to deal with your crap so you can help me deal with mine.
It is
That
so
is a
true.
question I ask when I'm trying to find a therapist. Yep.
As well, it should be. I mean, yeah, it used to actually be a requirement as you were in the training process of becoming a therapist that you needed X amount of hours, depending on which state you were in,
Mm-hmm.
of therapy yourself. And I hope they bring that back because that was actually really formative for me in a way that
Yeah.
nothing else has been.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's been interesting for me at my church a lot. I feel like half of our church is people that are going into counseling, which is
Mhm.
really intriguing. I mean, we always need more counselors in Florida. I don't know if you know this, but Florida is the rehab capital of the country. Things we love to, statistics we love to have. So
Brag, right?
so counselors do well here. So it's been interesting to be in community with people that are going through that same process, because I do know a few people in my church who are even filling in some of those hours for their education. As we talk
Yes.
about emotional health in a more broad way, I said our theme is resilience, resilience in spiritual life. As queer people, we've talked seriously when we started this season. I swear, we quoted more Bible about resilience than I think we ever have on our season premiere. Like, we quoted more scripture than I think we ever have
Oh
before.
yeah.
But we talked a lot about like resilience and spirituality and faith and in all of these different things. How do you believe emotional health plays into resilience?
Yeah. I think that when I think about resilience, I'm often looking back on times where I have either bounced back quickly from something or I have not bounced back very quickly. Um, there are different triggers or different events that make us sometimes spiral a little bit more than others. Um, and I think about um, times in my life where I've had something like a major loss. Might have been I've lost some friends along the way. Um, I had my mom died 5 years ago, and that was a major
Mm.
loss. And um, then there's like the day to day stuff of I got into an argument with a coworker, or I um, felt like I was really misunderstood by somebody that I talked to on the phone. All of those things, emotional health for me as it relates to coming back from those things has been about just the ability to say, okay, what is really happening here, Greg? am I talking to the person that just triggered me, or am I actually talking to somebody from my past, or thinking about an event from my past? So, for example, even today, this morning, I, as we're getting ready to move to San Diego, I was thinking about some events that had happened around looking for a house, and all of a sudden, I realized I'm getting all triggered about, oh my gosh, I'm gonna not find the right place, and then we're gonna be homeless, and then Paolo's gonna hate me, and then I'm gonna die alone, and I can go down the fun little spiral there, right?
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
That doesn't sound resilient, does it?
No.
But then what I'm able to do now is to say, okay, Greg, what's really going on? And actually, um, you're safe. There's plenty of options of places to live, even if it's not the perfect place. You have a lot of people there that love you and that want to be your family. You have a lot of ability and gifting, and you have a lot of ability to care for yourself, both financially and otherwise when needed. And I can walk myself back through those things in a way that has become quicker and quicker. So now I don't even have to like list that out so much, as my brain just automatically does it. And so emotional health as it relates to resilience is about being more and more training myself to quickly get through what is true and accurate about me, rather than what I am tempted to believe as the lie in the moment, or the thing that I'm telling myself based on my past experience or my past trauma. And the more we can keep telling ourselves what is true and good and beautiful, as Philippians 4:8 would encourage us to do, I would say the more we're able to bounce back, be resilient more quickly.
Yeah, that helps a lot in my experience with burnout, especially being in ministry and being in a ministry family. It was something that I picked up from my dad, and I've realized that it was so much of a remembrance of, I'm doing this because the Lord has called me to it, not because I have to. And that helped with resilience, of just being able to say, there are other things that I can fall back on, friends, other things that I used to watch my dad when he'd have hard times in ministry. And it was always like, it's kind of a morbid joke, but like it's a good coping skill. He's always say, well, I can always fall back on house painting because my grandfather had a painting company. And so he was always like, if this doesn't work out, I can always be a painter. Like I literally heard him say it like 6 weeks before he retired. If this doesn't work out, I can always be a painter. And like having that kind of bounce back attitude, and knowing that the Lord doesn't put us any place that our back is going to be up against the wall entirely, does just give you such a safe amount of that bounce back that we think of when we think of resiliency, of being able to pause and say, okay, what are the things I do know are true? And then having that ability to see that the Lord always, there's an out somewhere, for no matter what you're facing at the time. He's going to provide a way for you to stand up under it, even if it's a slightly dark joke about finding work painting houses. There's a way to be able to do that so that you can move on in a healthy manner.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it's coping. You're finding a way to cope that works for you by saying, I'm going to make a dark joke, and I'm going to remind myself that I'm not going to be down and out. And you even mentioned like sometimes people feel stuck, right? And so to remind ourselves, I'm not actually trapped in this particular place. I do have options, and to list sometimes for people to list those options can be really helpful.
Yeah,
it's about finding the kinds of truth that you need to speak to yourself, and hopefully that includes the gospel and what is true about yourself, how God sees you. And to do that with grace and gentleness rather than a harsh tone.
Well, and like there's so much of that connects to like even where I'm at emotionally. Like my counselor and I currently are working through that self-talk, that very thing that you were talking about. I would say I'm in that very early stage where I actually have to do it verbally. I'm like, the pandemic like knocked out my spiritual health, like my emotional health in so many ways. So I feel like I've been catching, even still this long into it, of like playing catch up to get back to where I was emotionally before all of that. But I think that something that you played in, like you were talking about, that I think is so important is, I think we can sometimes think that emotional health or emotional maturity means not being affected by anything. Like, oh, none of this affects me. But it's that, as you said, that ability to slowly gain strength in bouncing back more. It's not a matter of not being affected by things like a robot, but a matter of being able to process it well, cope with it well, be able to think through, like, I loved what you're talking about, like, am I reacting to this thing in this moment, or am I reacting to something in the past, to something that happened earlier? I had an issue like last week where I messed up on something around the house and just literally had a breakdown. Literally had a breakdown of like not cooking rice right. It was the most random thing, and I just started bawling, crying. And then Christian was even the one who had to then talk with me about, is this about rice, or is this about what happened earlier this week? And having to go, you're right. And then having to process through that and cope through that and do that very thing you're talking about, is like going through, what are these worst case scenarios? What are these things in my mind? But here's what is realistically like going to happen, or seeing that through that lens and being able to talk through that. And I think that building that ability, as you said, the more we can build that, the more we can do it. Like you said, not even having to verbally think through it or consciously think through it, then we can take ourselves through that much more subtly.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Yeah, I relate to all of that. I mean, the amount of times I have had this dramatically intense reaction to something equivalent to rice being cooked improperly could fill novels, I'm sure. But yeah, to then go back and be like, yeah, I love what Christian said. Is this actually about the rice?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. What is actually going on here? That's one of the
Yeah, I don't ever fall apart about the actual things. I mean, that probably would be the healthy thing to do at some point, but no. I mean, I completely melted down Saturday night because I dropped my kids off to be babysat with my parents, and neither of them had on shoes, and I'm like just sitting in the car in their front yard like ugly crying because they don't have shoes on, and my mom was like, "Are you okay?" No. It's like, it has nothing to do with the shoes.
Yeah.
We go lots of places without shoes, but
Shoes are not a requirement when you're a child.
no. Sometimes I really like, Greg, would you kind of say that breaking down about the little things really is kind of a safety mechanism or a coping mechanism, that like we can't face the big things, so we're going to cry about the rice and the shoes?
Sometimes, absolutely. Yeah, if we're putting up walls and we're guarded about the big things, and we haven't processed or dealt with trauma, oftentimes that it does come out in other ways. Where I'd never cried about my dog that died when I was 12, but now all of a sudden I'm crying because I had to put the toy or the stuffed animal dog in the closet instead of on display all of a sudden after all these years. Sometimes that brings up past things. The other thing that I really loved that Josh, that you had said about the pandemic was just the reminder of what an intense time we're going through. There's like a global corporate trauma happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
There's
Yes.
like in our lifetime so much fear about getting sick, or political tension, or insecurity about what our futures are going to look like. And it would be weird if we were not reacting to that.
Yeah.
Right.
So just to tell yourself, even compassionately, like, okay, it's not crazy for me to be having these feelings right now. It's not crazy for me to be worried or upset or thinking that my emotional health is not where it should be. Like, yeah, let's give ourselves some grace in that. This is a really hard time.
100%. Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest things as a help for me, is seeing, like, first of all, it's okay that all of these factors that play into it, exactly what you said, like all of these, for many people, housing crisis with rising prices, where am I going to live in a year, all of this different kind of stuff. There's so many different things playing into people's emotional health, and I feel like so many people think that they're going through it alone. They're the only people being affected by it. Many times those of us in ministry can feel like we're the only ministry people that are not holding it together. But then even just that ability to see, I kind of like, just as you were saying, that looking at what am I feeling, that listening to yourself is so good. And you mentioned trauma. None of us have that.
No, none of us.
None of us have that. But we have, we've talked about it a lot, even here on the podcast, but experiencing trauma, especially within the church. I mean, you even highlighted it in the story of your friend who, shared the gospel with you, and then the experience he had within the church. I mean, trauma within church walls is common for LGBT people. It's very hard to not have that. Even if you haven't experienced it yourself. I mean, you even shared the experience of your friend, therefore traumatized you about how you were going to respond or be accepted in the church, even if you never had that experience. So I would just love to hear what your thoughts are, kind of branching off of what you were saying before about trauma, acknowledging that there is a lot of trauma even within the specific LGBT experience that we have. What advice do you have about navigating that trauma within emotional health, especially when you're a gay Christian that has decided to still be in a church setting, which it's almost sometimes like, are we allowing ourselves just to be more traumatized? Would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Oh my gosh. I want to first say, I think I'm still in process in this way too, because I spent a lot of years as a closeted pastor in an evangelical church, and so I'm still learning ways in which that's impacted me. And so I'll share this knowing that I'm not some expert from the outside, but really I'm one of the people you're talking about too.
Yeah.
I think there's I think one thing that we need to remember is that we're not alone. Again, I think connection is the great healer, and that's where I'm so beyond grateful for the Revoice local chapters that are forming and the opportunities for us to find safe community.
Yeah.
Because there, just recognizing that there are other people that have had a shared experience really does help us to not feel alone, not feel crazy, be able to share stories with one another about what was helpful in conversations with pastors or ministry leaders, what was not helpful in those moments as well, and just to be able to normalize our experience. So shout out to Bekah and to the Revoice crew there for helping to make those things happen a lot more and more in the coming year. I think another thing that I've realized is, we often talk a lot about our expectations of the church, and I do have really, really high hopes and expectations for the church. But I'm also aware of the fact that hurt people, mm-hmm. And I've been around church world to know that people may not have the exact same hurts or trauma or wounding that I do, but everybody's got some, and everybody has their own closet that they're hiding into. And so if I'm reminded of that, then when I hear from that person or that ministry leader that's saying whatever they're saying, I can know that they may not actually be talking to me, and they may not actually be talking to me about being gay. They may be talking about something completely different. And
right.
What is the underlying fear? What painful thing happened to them? What are they afraid will happen if the gays come in and take over? Like, what is it that they're really responding to? And is there a way to talk about those things? Now, I recognize as I say that requires a lot of emotional health and resilience to even be able to go to that place where we're not so triggered.
Yeah.
But if we can have at least enough grace on ourselves to say, okay, I was triggered, I was re-traumatized, I did have that upsetting conversation. Maybe that wasn't actually my fault. Maybe this isn't really about me. Maybe I'm not the problem. Then that can at least be a helpful place in our own healing and our own place to kind of start thinking about how do I want to reapproach the conversation whenever it is that I am ready. I'll give you an example of something that really helped me. So there was, leading up to Revoice, I had posted something about how I was going to speak at the conference, and there were a couple people on there that they had already left my church years ago and are kind of let's just say staunchly not in favor of gays in the church. Is probably the nicest way I can put it. But I remember one of them had posted something on my wall that's just said, "So sad to hear what's happened to you, Greg." Now, in that moment, was that an attack? Yes. Do I have every right in the world to be upset about that? Yes. Dare I say to have the moral high ground? 100%. So what do I do in those moments? Well, I could have, very easily gone off. And I had some wonderful, loving, even straight friends that texted me, "Can you believe what so-and-so did? I want to go to his house." And, and then I thought about him. He's an older man that has some of his own mental health stuff, possibly early stages of dementia even. He sits on his front porch and just kind of rocks for hours a day. He's very lonely. And I just got really sad for him. I just said, man, my life is full of goodness and love and the body of Christ supporting me. In the grand scheme of things, like, not only does this person's comment not really matter, but I just pray for him. And it reminds me too, just, what are we meant to do as Christians in general with anybody that comes after us? Well, we love our enemy, right?
Yeah.
Even if they are our sworn enemy and they're out to take us down, we love our enemy. And I think what I tried to do in that moment was in order to love him, I had to come from a place of compassion and getting outside of myself. So I hope that's helpful. I don't want anyone to walk away feeling like, oh my gosh, Greg told me I just need to get over it. Do not get over it. Go through it, not over it.
That's right.
Yeah. I think that
it's like going on a bear hunt.
Yeah.
You gotta go through it. Yeah.
You got to go through it.
Yeah, I really think that that's good. And I think I've seen even just stages of how to process those things, even in my own life, of it's natural to react. And I think sometimes we, can or do need to react to those things. But even just being able to learn how to, I think for me, it's been that process of, in those moments when getting those critiques from people, of learning how to more internalize the validation and acceptance that I get from other people, to therefore allow it to be like, that's not as big of a deal. Like, I had someone who criticized me on a comment of Instagram, and I'm not even on social media anymore. And like, it was interesting because, like, I talked about it with some friends, but it was interesting to see my reaction to it now compared to previously, as I've just been able to stand more on a feeling of acceptance for people, and not saying this in a way of like, depending on what your reaction is, rates your like emotional maturity or something, or mine, but just a matter of like, I think for me, as I've been able to internalize that love and acceptance of God, and as well as other people, as you said, connection brings healing. I wrote it down. I was like, I think that that's so important.
Me too.
Right? It's so good. Because it's
such a good reminder. Such a good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
but I think it's that connection, and that connection we can internalize that connection, that acceptance of resting on that. Then when those things come, we are able to have, like, to give grace that is not deserved on their part in any way. But being able to go, you know what, or even just for our own self, I don't need to respond to you. I have a lot of other things to do. Any thoughts from you, Becca, on that?
Yeah, one of the, like, looking back at little phrases and things, that's become a lot of resiliency for my own mental and emotional health, of what are phrases that I need to hang tight to in those moments to keep from spiraling, to keep from jumping in. Because as a strong Enneagram 8, I want to fight every fight that is around. And that put me in a really unhealthy place during the last election cycle here in the United States. And just consistently over the last 2 years with everything that we faced with the pandemic, and having to learn and to remember what Greg was saying about there's always something else. Like, we cry over the rice. Usually people that are exploding about something, there's something else that they're exploding about. It's not that issue. And the phrase that I've used to take that, really, I mean, it's a lie that's designed to divide, especially Christians, from one another, of this person is attacking me, they are my enemy. That taking that thought captive and making it obedient to what Paul said in Ephesians 6, that we battle not against flesh and blood. And that is the phrase that the Holy Spirit brings to my mind consistently when I'm doom scrolling through whatever social media I might be looking at and want to jump in and tell somebody how wrong they are about something. That grace is what allows me to let them have the last word, which has been a huge part of my own sanctification and becoming more like Christ. Bigger than that. I mean, that's sometimes I want to tell people when they're arguing with me about gay identity language and things like that. I want to be like, listen, letting you have the last word on this is a much bigger area of sanctification than my sexuality has ever been. So you just appreciate the fact that Jesus is working in my heart on that issue. But yeah, being able to say that the person is not always, I mean, they're not the problem. That doesn't mean that we lay back and take it, especially if you're in some sort of consistent abusive situation. You don't just go, well, this person was hurt, so I just need to take it.
Nope.
That's not it at all. But when it's things like that it's daily hurts, little jabs that people are taking, that we can either say, you know, God loves you and I'm working on it, or I'm just not even going to respond. That sometimes that is a greatest indicator of health, is that we don't feel the need to go into every battle like it's a battle.
I really like that. And I'm really glad that you brought up the difference between that versus an abusive situation. Because there are certain people in your life that are not core people, right? And that they're going to be jabbed. If we have a deep bench, and we have our core of people that we really love and trust, and who trust and love us, then that outer sphere doesn't matter as much when they take those jabs. But sometimes, for those people that are going through abuse, either in the church or, gosh, in any area of life, in the home, in relationships, that's a very different matter. And if that's the case, then we need to take an honest look at that and say, what are some ways in which we can get you to a safer place? Do we need to leave the church? Do we need to leave the home? Do we need to find strategic ways of making a plan for that? And there are times where I think that is appropriate, and we don't just need to do the mental energy of walking through, okay, here are the steps. Here's how I'm going to get to forgiveness. Here's how I'm going to love my enemy. You can do that, but from a safe distance.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's really key. I love that distinction because like I know that's even been something for me when I started looking for a church. I had a big stipulation of I didn't want to go to a church that I needed to train how to love me. Already do that with all the
Yeah.
other churches. I didn't want to do that here. I wanted to be in a church where I didn't have to argue for it. I didn't have to deal with this. I didn't need to train my own pastor. And I knew that was going to limit a lot of churches. But I was like, for me personally, it's part of that inner part. I was like, I just need this inner part so I can, because I already deal with that in work with so many other churches, with so
Yeah.
many other pastors, with Christians, with LGBT people, all this stuff. In order to deal with that there, I need this core part here to be good and strong. And it's even funny when you're talking about like Bekah with, desk scrolling just on Instagram and social media. I have found that many times, the times when I actually just randomly want to go on social media and find someone that I disagree with to argue with them, because it does happen,
Yes.
are many times the times when I feel very powerless in like relationship with my family or these people that I'm like, well, I can't, like, I make boundaries with them. Like if a person is like, we have a connection, I can't, like, this connection is not going to be broken. So I'm putting a boundary up of the place that you have in my life. But obviously when I feel powerless in those kinds of things, because of the hurt that is experienced there, it can be easy to jump onto social media or to go after in these other places, and being able to do that, that talking through, just like you said, and it's that way of me being the hurt person who then hurts people, in all of it.
Yes, that's such a great example of like, if I'm not dealing with it, I'm just like, look at me, I'm so strong, I don't have any problem, right? Like, then you're exactly right. We have these imaginary scenarios in our head sometimes where we're like, I want to yell this thing at my mom or my dad, and but we can't do that. So yeah, we go on social media and
Yeah.
and I'll tell them, as opposed to here's where connection comes in. Josh connects with Greg and Bekah and says, I just remembered this really awful thing that my mom and dad said to me when I was a kid. And it's really, really troubling me. And I really wish I could have said this. And I really wish I could have had a different response. And oh man, Josh, that's awful. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I love you. I hate that you went through that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you go through that process, and then healing has happened because you've gotten to go through it. You've gotten to experience the real feeling, but you've done it in a healthy way that was about the actual issue.
Well, and that actually
Oh,
plays into
that's beautiful.
an extra question that I have, kind of like a side question related to this. Because I think this happens with these kind of like trauma responses, that we have, especially within the queer community. We can even say it more specifically, the Side B community. Many times we will have those trauma responses on each other, where we are interacting even just as a community, as LGBT people. It can be in person on Twitter or whatever, however it is. And like, what advice do you have of like, so if I am interacting with a person and I'm just seeing maybe something even in our immediate interactions, or something where I'm like, wow, like we can see the trauma response in other people in our community that we love and we care for, and how to help well to help others, even as we're dealing with our own trauma, in these kinds of things that might come out in our community about how we respond to each other, and how do we do that well for each other?
Oh, I love that question. Something I've definitely noticed the most, and truthfully, this happens across the board, but I see this a lot in Side B world, is there's a real fear of abandonment. I think that because so many of us have strained relationships with our biological families, our chosen families have come to mean so much to us.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we've often been raised in such a way where if we do something wrong, or worse, we are something wrong, then we have learned that that means somebody will leave us or abandon us. And so sometimes when we have very human discussions or arguments with people that we love who have become chosen family or Side B friends, we get into a state of panic, not because, again, of what we're talking about as much as, oh my gosh, they've realized there's something wrong with me, or they realize they don't like me anymore. And what is likely to happen? They're going to abandon me. They're going to leave me. So the thing I like to say in those moments where it may not even necessarily feel related is, hey, I just want to let you know, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. And the reason we're actually having a heated discussion right now is not because I'm getting ready to leave you. It's because I want more relationship with you, and we need to get to figure out this hard thing that we're talking about.
That's good.
And so if we can just lay the groundwork that this connection will not be broken and there's mutual love for one another, I think that can be a really helpful place to go in the middle of those kinds of discussions.
That's good.
Ooh.
I know. Just want to take a minute and pause and think through
Yeah.
that. Unfortunately, dead space doesn't work on a podcast.
It doesn't.
This,
No.
this is my idea of small talk, by the way. So, yeah.
This is why we love you so much.
Right, yeah. Ask me about weather or sports ball or something like that. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm tired.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was something somebody said about the Revoice conference, was that we don't mess around with small talk. They're like, you walk in the door and the conversation is like a 10. I was like,
Tell me your childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get their name at the end of the conversation.
Yeah. Right.
There's a meme on the internet that was like, LGBTQ relationships and friendships. Share with me your childhood trauma 10 years down the road. Oh, you have a dog?
That's exactly it. Yep.
Love it. I'm here for it. It's so good.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that I think that's so important, because we can many times so get caught up in the conversation at hand or what's being said to not realize that emotionally it's probably something very different happening.
Yeah.
And being able to try and recognize that. And I know that's hard for me when I get into conversations like that with someone, especially when it's someone within our community, someone I cherish so much, and being like, I'm being hurt in this situation as well. It's hard for me then to look and try and care and be like, try and see the person where they're at and give that reassurance. As you said, I just want to stop right now and say, I'm here. I love you. I care for you. And being able to allow that space for that, trying to recognize that what is happening may not be, like, the emotions may not be connected to the present moment in that way, or the present conversation or topic.
I have this with Paolo, but I think this could be probably part of the greater Side B conversation of just like the greatest hits of one-liners, so I'll just be like, just go through this all the time with me, Paolo. So it's, I love you. I'm not going anywhere. You're not crazy. You are enough. It's like, okay, just contextualize it for that particular moment or conversation or thing that's going on. And we're probably on the right track.
Yeah. 100%. We have 2 more questions left that we want to get to. Our first one, kind of building on all of this, like within like LGBTQ psychology, I'm not a psychologist, not even a student in this, but or anything, but I understand, you hear a lot about the common term of second adolescence. This kind of comes up in many spaces. Can you define this term for us and just kind of share, do you believe this is an accurate depiction of the experience for many queer people? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And if so, like, what are some tools? You don't have to answer that all at once, but like, yeah, just love to hear your thoughts there.
Yeah, I heard about this term pretty early on in my coming out Side B kind of conversation, largely because I was experiencing it. I was like, I have a crush on everyone, and all of a sudden, every single one of those crushes, it's like we're gonna ride off into the sunset and spend the rest of our lives together, and it's gonna be perfect.
Yes.
And you know, on the one hand, it was this made all the sense in the world to my tender little heart, and on the other hand, I was like, I'm also 38 years old, and why do I feel like a teenager all of a sudden?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't I supposed to be, this emotionally mature therapist pastor guy? And I'm not feeling that at all right now. So I quickly learned about this thing called second adolescence, and shout out to the likes of Peter Valk and Art Pereira, who walked me through many of those conversations early on in my secular life. And I then ended up reading a lot more about it in the book Velvet Rage. But it's basically this idea that because of the closet, we go through the experiences that oftentimes a teenager does, but we do that later in life at the time that we come out. So a teenager that is straight is usually having the ability to very freely talk with somebody about who they have a crush on, and what are their hopes and dreams about relationships and sex and kissing and all those kinds of things. But because of those of us who did have to go into the closet out of self-protection, we didn't get a chance to kind of go through that and live through that. So later on in life, we are having those first conversations and those first open feelings. And I think that's really normal. The thing that really helped me, I think, as I was going through that, was to say, okay, this may feel like all the teenage feelings, and they're very big and real and good. That doesn't mean that I'm not a mature person. That doesn't mean I can't couple that with the wisdom I've gotten in many other areas of my life and many of the other relationships that I've witnessed over the years, and go through that in a way that doesn't involve as many of the teenage immaturity or teenage hormones, and again, not block it out or pretend it's not there as much as just kind of like we've been talking about throughout the conversation. Go through it, not around it. So that's helped me.
Yeah, and read Velvet Rage if you're a guy. Sadly, we need to. Do you know of like a female equivalent, Bekah, for the queer experience to Velvet Rage?
Unfortunately, I do not.
We need
and I wish that there was something.
Yeah.
It's like somebody needs to write that, but I for sure don't have time and don't know that I would be appropriately equipped to do so. But
yeah, I would love.
Yeah, we need something like that.
I would love. I'm putting this out to listeners. If you know a really good book on just like the female queer experience, especially like emotionally, psychologically, I would love to hear that. I would love to hear about that. We've talked about Velvet Rage a lot, but I would love to see if anyone has suggestions about really good books for the female experience for that. But
so helpful.
Yeah, I was gonna say I had several that I read back in the day that were really helpful, but I would like to reread them
before
from
recommending
my current
them.
position and perspective before recommending them. Yeah, that's probably a better way of saying that.
Understandable. 100%. I've been there before, like going, wow, that was a really good book, but that was a really good book for where I was at. Let me just make sure.
Yeah, as I turned and looked at my shelf of all the helpful books on sexuality, and they're all now not where I would easily just hand them to someone and say, hey, read this. So I probably need to go back through and reread some things.
Yeah. No, but thank you for sharing that. Great. I mean, I think that the whole thing of second adolescence, it can be very jarring when you don't know what's going on. Like, why am I crying over this? Like, this was never my life. Or like, just even, I even found it for me, like when I started making probably irresponsible decisions based off of a boy, like just being able to spend time with a boy that just naturally would not have been my decision making beforehand in really weird, crazy ways.
And again, of course, like when you've had all this bottled up for so long, like of course you're going to make irrational decisions for a boy. Like, how could you not? It's just such a human thing to not know what to do with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so again, grace, compassion on yourself. You're
Yeah.
not crazy.
I
all
also
of
think
that.
it's like that hard part that I also had to I had to have a weird forgiveness for my friends who walked, and like also apology to my friends who walked with me through that time, because they would,
Right.
I was coming out, or I was like kind of finding, more not coming out because I had come out earlier, but when I went through my own second adolescence, when I was kind of making these irrational decisions, my friends would stop me on them like, hey, don't move across the country for this boy that you met 2 days ago. And, you know, things like that. And I would be like, you're homophobic. Like, why do you hate me being gay? And then I would have to come back to them and be like, so I'm sorry. You were right. And this understanding that there are chances that your friends are trying to help you.
Right. Isn't that a crazy thought?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember like sobbing irrational conversations with friends that it's like, I think I like this person and I don't really know, and I just met this person and I don't know if I like them or if I like them, or maybe last week I thought I liked you and I don't know. And yeah, I mean, like, that is sadly normal for us on wherever we are. But you're right, most people do that at like 13 or 14. And like, even with the bisexual experience,
Yeah.
that you get that part that we get to do that for the opposite gender on a relatively normal scale, but you still face a second adolescence when you come out as being bi. That, all right, this whole part of me that I've had pushed away, I get to deal with now. And the weird part about like coming out, especially in your 20s or even 30s, is that your frontal lobe is fully formed. So it's almost like an out of body experience, because the whole time it's happening, you're like, I know that this is absurd,
Yes.
but you're still doing it. And so that adds to like the judgment and the shame a lot of times of, I know better and I'm still doing this. But that it is a healthy part of development. And when you get stuck in a place for whatever reason, a lot of times it just takes time for the rest of your heart and your mind to catch up, and that it's not going to be that way forever any more than middle school was forever.
Amen.
Like, that was a huge help for me, was I'm not always going to be here any more than I've always been in the 7th grade, which sounds like some sort of horror story.
I mean, it feels like 7th grade. Second adolescence feels like 7th
Yes,
grade.
it is absolutely 7th grade, but it's not going to last forever.
And I was
So,
literally thinking about the bisexual experience. Shout out to Ashley and Elizabeth, who've talked about this on the podcast, of that whole
Yes.
weird experience of like going through adolescence related to opposite sex, like, you know, attractions. But then you're like, well, crap, now I respect. I can't imagine. Yeah.
Good. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, shout out to, yeah, because when you've gone through one adolescence and then you go through a second, I mean, woo,
I would
God bless
also,
you.
I'm making a note for a future episode, because I don't want to speak into experience that I don't understand. But as we plan for the ACE episode that we're doing this season, I would love to hear
Yes.
from our ACE brothers and sisters. And honestly, if you are listening and you are ACE, you know, mention us on Twitter, or like if you're a patron on our Patreon community. Would love to hear about your experience of second adolescence as being asexual, or demi, and how that has been for you, because I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Really, for that. Yeah.
For our last question, we're going to ask you the question we're asking everyone this season. What is a message you would give to your earlier self? And you can pick the age of yourself that you're giving the message.
I thought about the first moment where I think I really knew it wasn't just like I think some boys are cute, but like I really went, oh my God, I'm gay. I was probably 14, I think. And I remembered this feeling of dread coming over me
Mm.
and pain and loneliness and making that, for whatever reason, that weird agreement with myself to say, you will never share this.
Mm.
And if I could go back and talk to that version of Greg and just let him know he is so safe to share. He's so lovable. He's so thoughtful and deep. He is going to help a lot of people because of who he is.
Mm.
He's going to have a life full of meaning and purpose and joy. And to just hold him while he cries through the grieving process of that. That would be my little reparenting moment.
Amen. Amen. Thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable. We love you, Greg.
Yep. I've come out of enough closets. I might as well just keep coming out of them.
That's right. Closets are overrated.
They
Closets.
really are.
Let's have a closet-free house. Come on.
I mean, I don't know. I have way too many clothes, but okay.
I was going to say, let's not take that too far.
All right. Works better as a metaphor than
There you go. Yeah.
Than as practical architecture.
You have no closets, you end up with wardrobes, and then you end up in, other fantastical worlds.
You know how like
So
that
unless we're
culture
all-
affects like architecture? Could you just imagine a trend where like queer people just decided they were just not going to have closets, and you just go into a house and you're like, oh, a queer person lived here. There's not a single closet.
Rip that out. That's right.
No. Wait, check this out. You could design one of the rooms in the house to look like a super cute boutique.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, we didn't see that coming.
There
You go shopping every day.
Yeah, come on.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah, I'm into it.
Okay. All right.
Then I'd have to invite one of y'all over every day to help me get dressed because I don't do well with shopping.
My like life goal has always been to have the closet from Clueless, where she like just puts the whole thing and she swipes and then she like picks out her outfit and then like pushes the button and then the like whole outfit comes right in front of her. That's been like
so
my
fabulous.
Dream for life.
I was obsessed with that closet on Clueless. I loved it.
I want it so much. My friends and I have been joking around that I'm like saving up money to do a wardrobe, like just change up my wardrobe and stuff. And I have some friends that will potentially go with me on that. And I've been joking around. I'm like, maybe we should just like record this whole outing of like Josh's new closet wardrobe and put it as a episode of Life on Side B. I doubt actually anyone would want to hear that. But
I was going to say, not only would I tune in, but I think Paolo and I would fly out to Florida for your shopping adventure.
I'm already popping my popcorn. For
oh
that
my
one.
gosh, please do come down. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Greg, we love you. Thank you so much for
Love you
joining.
too.
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Becca and Josh, you two are some of my heroes, so I feel so honored to be here with you guys. Thank you so much for creating so many safe spaces for me to feel like I could end up in the place that I'm at now. And I'll never stop being grateful for my Side B heroes here.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, everyone
Got to do it all together.
listen, follow Greg wherever. Where are you on? Are you on Instagram? Like, where are you at? Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You are more than welcome to follow or friend me. And then I have a website, which I need to update soon about all the church changes. But you can definitely find a lot more about me on gregpiken.com, Piken. And that's got just a little bit of information about ministry, counseling, some other things that I do, as well as links to things that I've written and talks I've given.
Awesome.
Beautiful.
We
And if you don't know Greg, you definitely want to check that out because he's a person worth knowing.
absolutely. And we can't wait for like all of the amazing things God has as you go to San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Can't wait to stay tuned for more.
Yes. All right. Thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you soon. Bye, friends.
Take care.
Bye.